And man, I was sitting there watching, Sammy, the Hard Knocks episode. And I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about the way that it has been presented to everybody. Obviously I don't know, it's a little bit more PG than I think a lot of people anticipated. You were sitting there going to see a Batman movie that you thought was going to be directed by Christopher Nolan. Instead, it's Batman 66 with Adam West, and it's a little bit more campy, which is fine with me. But, there's some things that Hard Knocks does so especially well is capturing stories like the one with Ian Wheeler. And this was one of the most gutting things. And of course, we saw it play out. We saw his mother waiting outside in the moment that he had to tell her that, he tore his ACL and all that stuff. And that's really the things that I wanted from Hard Knocks. And I know a lot of people were like, I want more X's and O's. I want more. I'm like, listen, we have access to all 22 footage nowadays. We have, NFL Plus, NFL Pro, all these different tools at our own disposal that you can go out and sort of just find all this kind of information. You can find statistical information on every team like this. There's no hiding this stuff anymore. But where the NFL films and Hard Knocks is really at its best is telling stories like that of Ian Wheeler. So we wish him the best. And a couple of guys, Brendan Bates was cut, and Redding, I believe, is coming back to the practice squad. So there's a lot of things going on, but I think it's just indicative of how great this Chicago Bears roster has become over the last couple of years. And we got a couple of guys here today to talk about it. So, Sammy, let's go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Rank.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois, the sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means. It is time for Take It to the Rank. Great show for you today. We have the assistant editor of the Bears Wire and co-host of the Bear Down Chicago pod, Brendan Sugrue, will be joining us here in just a moment. And later on in the show, former NFL tight end and Bachelor in Paradise contestant Clay Harbor is going to be with us, and we look forward to talking to them. But first, want to let everybody know that the world's largest sports book in Las Vegas is right at your fingertips in Illinois. The Circa Sports app is sports betting the way it should be. It's anywhere in Illinois, and you can experience high betting limits, better money line splits, more in-game betting, and the best customer service. Download your new bookie today. Visit circasports.com and start betting like a pro from anywhere in Illinois. If you or someone you know might have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234. And again, the Circa Sports app is sports betting the way that it should be. And I will let everybody know that I was in Las Vegas over the weekend doing so many drafts. As a matter of fact, it's wild that the number of people are like, yeah, I was at Circa over the weekend. I'm like, really? Like, how did I miss all these people? It's a fantastic property, but listen, I don't want to sit here and waste too much of your time because I want to get to our first guest, my favorite sax player in the world, up there with Kirk Pengilly of In Excess. It is Brendan Sugrue. And Brendan, how you living, man?
What's up, Adam? I'm doing well. This is such a great time of the year with football coming back. First of all, I did finally listen to In Excess.
Okay.
And the saxophone players. I love it. Honestly, the kind of sound I used to play with, I don't play as much anymore, but I finally did that just for you because I wanted to let you know that I did listen to it. And two, just being that football's coming back, it's so good to see you back on my TV talking fantasy football. I swear to God, I'm not just saying this. It's one of my favorite shows I love to watch and listen to when working out. I was on the treadmill the other day, and you and Cynthia were on talking fantasy football player rankings, and I'm like, yes, this is finally it. Football is back. So it's great to see you, and it's great to talk with you again.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be able to talk about fantasy football on the NFL Network. Given the way everything has gone with the industry over the last couple of years, I will let everybody know, and I appreciate your comments. It's not something that I take lightly. I know that I have a job that a lot of people would love to do, so I enjoy every moment of it. And those shows, not no disrespect to anybody else on the cast, but those shows with Cynthia, oh, they go to another level, and I always appreciate. We always have a lot of fun, and she was very gracious in doing my league of record draft order. Her and Patrick did it off air during one of our breaks. It was a lot of fun. But so I really do appreciate that. And like you said, football is back. And I wanted to talk about something that struck me: the Bears roster. When we think about it now, obviously it's great having Caleb Williams and all that stuff. When you look at the Bears roster, and let's go back to like 2021, we started a couple of cornerbacks named Kendall Vidor and Duke Shelley, who are playing alongside with Jalen Johnson. This team looks completely different. Do you think the secondary is maybe the most improved group out? The quarterback I get, but like the secondary is just completely, for lack of a better term, it's sick now.
It is. I did see that from Mark Potash, who's comparing the rosters from 21 and 24. I have vivid nightmares of going into week one and just thinking, okay, there's no more, like, there's no room or there's no moves coming to the cornerback position. We're really riding with guys like Marquis Christian and Artie Burns and all of that. And sure enough, Matthew Stafford made the Bears pay in week one. It is very impressive with what Ryan Poles has done with that cornerback group and safety group as well. He really invested both, particularly in the draft, his first two drafts, to make sure that was a point of strength. And you saw it last year, especially at the end of the year, with guys like Tyreek Stevenson coming on. Thought Jaquan Brisker was playing better. Kyler Gordon, when he stays on the field, is one of the most electric players, and I don't say that lightly. He's just everywhere. And then, of course, Jalen Johnson taking the next step and becoming an actual shutdown corner. It's both not only getting other players, but also developing guys like Johnson, because even back in 2021, he was relatively unproven. He had a decent rookie year, but now you're asking him to be the number one corner. And then it was kind of a tough ask, but now clearly he's the number one guy. But you also look at that roster, the wide receivers obviously are such a huge improvement. You had Allen Robinson on his way out, and Darnell Mooney was still relatively unproven. Now you have two bona fide number one wide receivers and one of the best receivers in the draft. So it's really neck and neck for the secondary as well as the wide receivers for most improved over the last 3 years.
And hit me with the name. Who was the person? I know it was on Twitter. Who was the person who had compared that?
Oh, Mark Potash of the Sometimes.
That's right. So I want to make sure that I give him the proper credit. Yeah, he did. I saw that floating around online, and I was like, "Holy Lord!" Sorry, Mark. Didn't mean to just gloss over your name like that. But thanks for putting that together. I really love it too, because like we released Reddy Stewart, and it's funny because I feel obviously he would have been 17 in 2021, but he would have been a starting player on that Bears team in 2021. And now he's somebody that we're like, I hope he makes it through waivers kind of. I think that's a huge difference.
I think so too. And I was going back and forth looking at the roster and watching camp and watching preseason. There was an argument to be made for Reddy Stewart. Obviously, Josh Blackwell got the job over him, but he played phenomenally as well. Adrian Colbert flashed. I know we saw that in Hard Knocks yesterday on Tuesday night. And so just from top to bottom, it really was the deepest position. And we haven't even talked about Terrell Smith, who filled in pretty admirably last year. He had kind of a quiet camp. He did have an interception against the Bengals. So there's a ton of playmakers here. And I feel so confident that if and when, because unfortunately they always happen, when injuries do occur, it's going to be a next man up mentality. And there isn't going to be that much of a drop off, because this group is just so deep and so talented.
Yeah. It's like we don't have to play Madden with the injuries off. We can kind of handle that. We have a roster that's there to sustain it. And you obviously mentioned the offense, the wide receivers too, because I think that the difference between wide receivers is also pretty stark in comparison, especially when you consider, a couple of years ago, I think if the Bears would have traded for, Like if it was a different organization or different whatever grouping, if it was Ryan Pace, let's just say that he would have traded for Keenan Allen and then been like, oh, we're trading down, or we're trading our 9th pick for some veteran or something like that. I really like the way that the wide receiver room is constructed. Were you surprised by some of the cuts? I know Colin Johnson didn't make it. Ian Wheeler, of course, sustained the injury and is going to be on IR for the entirety of the season. Do you feel good about the cuts that were made and the roster that they're rolling forward with?
I really do. There really wasn't much of a surprise because you kind of saw the writing on the wall with how this roster was constructed. I know some people were surprised that Dominique Robinson made the team. They were afraid that Daniel Hardy was going to get cut in favor of him. Fortunately, Hardy was able to make it. I actually think that might be the biggest surprise, is that Hardy was able to make it. Not that he didn't have a good preseason in camp, because he did, but I just didn't think the Bears would carry that many defensive ends. So I was thrilled to see that he made it. I had a feeling Reddy Stewart wasn't going to make it. Colin Johnson's been hurt. Quite a few guys, unfortunately, they just haven't been able to play the last few weeks, but nothing really jumped out to me. And I think that goes to show how strong this roster is and how much it has been built in the vision of Ryan Poles, because you can kind of see, okay, here's the hierarchy of who the players are. I know some people were surprised that Bayless Jones made it, but considering
he was too good at the end. Once he made the switch to running back, I thought he was playing way too well.
Absolutely. And credit to him for picking it up relatively quickly too. This is not like, okay, you see hole, you go run towards it. You need to learn, the pass blocking techniques. You have to figure out, some of the lineman pulls. And I thought from when he started in week 2 of the preseason, technically week 1, but before the Hall of Fame game, and then all the way until the Chiefs game, I saw a vast amount of improvement from him. So they see him as a weapon. I see him as a weapon. And I think that, again, you just kind of saw like what they wanted to do and who the players they wanted to keep. So, I can't really say I was surprised. How about you?
No, not at all. I mentioned this when I was at Bears camp. It's one of the running backs were actually working out right in front of us, and the coaches were riding Bayless Jones, which for those who never played sports or did anything like that, you're like, whoa, they really don't like him. It's like, no. When they don't talk to you is when they don't like you. Like that, when they start ignoring you, when they've given up on you, that is really when the red flags come out. So when the coaches were sitting there, on his case, I'm like, okay, he's got a really good chance. They really want to make this work because it's a point of emphasis for the coaches to try to get him to like make sure he's hitting the holes correctly or fighting through stuff. Like, yes, you're like, okay, good. I felt really comfortable and I felt good for him because, personally, I know him a little bit. So I'm like, I want him to make it. And I know Tyler's safe and everything like that. So I'm like, okay, we can get Tyler and Bayless one more chance to go out there and grow and learn and experience. I think both of them have an opportunity to go make an impact on this team. And it's really like the thing I'm the most excited about is this wide receiver room. And it partly is because what you said about being on NFL Fantasy Live. Love being on that show. I love talking about Rome Odunze. I got an opportunity to meet him. Obviously, great person. And he's a great player. Like I'm still not ready to concede that we have to pretend like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors are better than him. I'm like, I feel pretty confident with Rome Odunze. And it's not just because my fantasy team is sublime with Rome Odunze. It's because I think he's that good of a player. What do you expect from Rome this season?
That's a good question. And my expectations have actually shifted since he was drafted, because I think myself and probably a lot of other people assumed that he would have a slow start to this offense. He could learn behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and he wouldn't have to be counted on. But then you see what he can do, and you see his skill set, both in the middle of the field, on end arounds, downfield with some of those big catches against the Bengals, as well as in practice. And you say to yourself, this can be a bona fide wide receiver 1 and be a huge red zone threat. So at first I thought he was going to maybe, see limited snaps a little bit coming into the first few weeks and then grow at the end of the year. I don't think that's the case. I really think he has a legit opportunity to lead the Bears in different receiving categories, whether that's touchdowns, whether that's receiving yards. I'm not sure if it's going to be catches, but I think going into it, I saw Keenan Allen, DJ Moore on one level, and Rome Odunze underneath them. I see them all on equal levels, and I think it's going to be just ride the hot hand, ride the player who has the most favorable matchup. And I will say, I think Rome Odunze out of all of those three will lead the Bears in touchdowns just because he is such a big receiving touchdown threat. He can go up and get it, and he's fast enough to beat defenders to the deep ball.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult because it's preseason games and they're running a little bit of a different things. They're not necessarily putting everybody out in the field that you would expect to be on the field in week one. But we talked about what a stroke of genius it was for Matt Eberflus to watch Caleb Williams go 3 and out on 3 consecutive drives. And you're like, this sucks. Like, here we go again. Put him back out there. The play that got the offense jump-started was the end around to Rome Odunze, as you just mentioned a moment ago. And it's like, well, they obviously think very highly of him. If he's their guy that you're like, you know what, go get us out of this. Like, go out there and do something special. And I think like that's going to be a huge part, especially when we get into week one, when we start going up against teams like the Tennessee Titans, who have a really strong defensive front. Be like, okay, well, we got to be a little bit more creative with the way that we move the football. And Rome Odunze is going to be a huge asset with that. And like you, like I was thinking, and I still sort of subscribe to this because I truly believe that Caleb's going to do his best to get DJ Moore involved. You want to make sure that Keenan Allen is fed and ready to go, and that it might be a couple of weeks before Rome Odunze really starts taking off. But for me, I truly believe, I think I kind of compare it to what happened last season with Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit, where they were like, okay, we got David Montgomery, so we don't need to go all out immediately. We're just going to let him do his thing and get comfortable at the NFL level, figure out where the back of the end zone is, doing things like that, and then really having it take off with Rome Odunze being that guy. And so I'm into it. I feel great about it.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of thinking he's not on the level of Jamar Chase. I'm not trying to say that or anything like that because I think Jamar Chase is, one of the top 3 wide receivers in the league.
Best,
but yeah, right. But he came in with the Bengals, coming in with Joe Burrow, who obviously they had a connection in college, and he just lit it up even while the team had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And I know both of those players back then weren't on the level of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Certainly not now, especially with Boyd, but he skyrocketed up. And I think even for a lot of people that took them by surprise saying, wow, we thought this was going to be a little bit more of a learning curve. I just think it's more possible, especially with how much receivers are doing more in college. And somebody like Odunze, he has so much college experience. He has so many reps. The fact that he led the FBS in yards last year, and he was the leader over the course of the last 2 seasons. So he's coming from a prospect, he's a fairly refined prospect coming in. And it seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. He can learn the playbook. I just think the learning curve and easing him in is going to go a lot faster than people think. And, to your point, it may be like a couple weeks, but I could definitely see us coming back here in late September, early October saying Rome Odunze is the guy right now. And he and Caleb have that connection. And it really is exciting because we have not had a rookie wide receiver like this for the Bears in quite some time. Even guys, injuries or not, it was a much slower learning curve. And I just think it's not going to be the case when it comes to Odunze. Yeah,
and I think it's way better than Alshon Jeffrey, who I was very excited about when he was coming out of South Carolina. I think this is way better. And I think that the thing too, and you talk about him fitting into this wide receiver room, at Washington, Jalen Polk is a pretty good wide receiver. Jalen McMillan down in Tampa Bay is also like they were stacked at the wide receiver position. I don't think a lot of people understood how loaded Washington was, and maybe the Falcons didn't realize this either. Now that they're starting to get Michael Penix into camp, like, oh, he had 3. And I know that LSU always gets the shine of like, look at all the wide receivers that they turn out. Ohio State did the same thing. A couple of years from now, I really truly believe that we're going to be looking at this University of Washington draft class. These wide receivers will be like, holy Lord, that team was loaded. It's kind of like, it reminds me more of Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry coming out, where people were sort of excited, And then they exploded onto the scene, and everybody's like, oh, in retrospect, you look back at the team had like Jeremy Hill and like some other guys too who are great. I think Washington's going to be like that, and I expect Rome Odunze to be a part of it. And by the way, if you're somebody who collects sports cards, you should be buying Rome Odunze cards. And at Windy City Sports Cards, they specialize in buying and selling all things related to Chicago sports, whether you are a diehard fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, or Sky. They have got you covered with an extensive collection of sports memorabilia and collectibles. In addition to their Chicago-focused items, they also offer a vast collection of sports trading cards and memorabilia from your favorite teams and favorite players. And by the way, I know they're bidding on a thing to run a fantasy team with me, and I kind of hope they win. It's the pros versus Joes thing that I'm kind of falling off on, but they're in on it. They've made some trading cards for Greg Braggs and myself. It's a really cool company. So anybody who's into sports cards, I go through cycles with sports cards, like really get into it, then I peel back, really get into it. And now my kids are looking into it, and they're trying to figure out. I'm like, we got to get these Rome Odunze cards because it might be too expensive to jump into Caleb Williams. But let's talk about Caleb. You know, we've gone all this way. I don't want to be ashamed to say that I'm really excited about this. I know that I was excited about Justin Fields. Don't put Mitch Trubisky on me, but do you feel like I feel like the hype is really justified and we should feel good about backing Caleb Williams?
Absolutely. I mean, come on. He's checked every single box so far, going back to college. I mean, we can talk about how he sustained being the top prospect for not 1, but 2 years in a row. That is insanely hard to do. Yeah. And even if he had a quote unquote down year in his final season of college, that still wasn't enough for other teams to be like, well, you're dropping down our draft boards. No, he was still clearly far and away the top option. I think he's fit seamlessly in with this Bears locker room. He's so charismatic. He understands his place, and you can kind of see him, you know, when he came in as a, you know, draft pick, one of his first press conferences, he said, I'm doing a lot more listening than talking right now. I need to find my voice. I need to ingratiate myself with this locker room. And you see that building and getting more comfortable and finding that voice with his teammates. You see it at practice. You see it in the preseason games. You see it in Hard Knocks with some of those clips of how much he's just, you know, dapping up his teammates, whether it's backups, whether it's starters, you know, talking about how just, hey, have patience with me. I'm gonna figure this out. And he shows that special ability to make plays off the mark. The Bengals game, obviously, we talk about him rolling out, finding Odunze, the run, the different arm angle throws. Obviously, you wish to see more because he only played in 2 preseason games, but he just has this way about him where he understands the expectations. He's not shying away from it. I loved his initial quote where somebody asked him about, do you feel pressure or do you think the bar's set too high? And he's like, why duck? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I love that, because you know what this team has gone through. Maybe you don't, like, you know, you haven't lived it like you or me, but you know how much the Bears have been pained when it comes to quarterback experiences, and he's not running from it. I also love that there has been absolutely none of quarterback controversy, or whether it's like, hey, should we start a veteran? Should we bring him in late? He has gotten the reps from day one. And I think that's so important because he's had months to now establish that connection with DJ, with Cole, with Keenum, with the entire starting offensive line. We didn't see that. Adam, we haven't really seen that ever, because for the longest time, it's always been the veteran placeholder. And I think that was detrimental in terms of getting the quarterback ready and comfortable in his rookie season. So I am not shying away from high expectations. Early on, I probably was, because we've been burned before. But you know what? This guy has been built for this. He's somebody who's lived on his own since 17. He's gone into high expectation situations in Oklahoma, and he just blew him out of the water with just, you know, taking over for Spencer Rattler. And so I just feel like for this city, for this team, he's built for this. And maybe things start out a little bit slowly because that happens with rookie quarterbacks. But from the beginning of September to the end of December, early January, I think we're going to look back and say this was easily the best rookie season for a Bears quarterback, and he is the guy going forward for the next 10 years. I truly believe that. I'm not just, saying that hyperbolically.
I really believe it this time. I'll be honest. I was behind Justin Fields as much as anybody, and I was a huge fan, and I even sat here and straddled the fence when everybody was going through the Bears civil war of like, do we build around Justin? Do we go for Caleb? And I said, I understand the science of both sides. And when Carmen Vitale was joining us, she was steadfast that it was going to be Caleb Williams, but I also didn't want it. Listen, I didn't want to be in one of these situations where it's kind of like if your friend says he's breaking up with somebody and you're like, oh yeah, you know what? You should have never been with this person. They're terrible. And then they stay together and you're like, I don't know how to take back all these things that I've been saying for the past couple of months. So I was trying to play it safe and still be supportive. But when they made this switch and they said, we're going to go with Caleb Williams. I've been a fan of his, mostly during his USC time. I remember him at Oklahoma, but I wasn't like following him like I followed him at USC. And to me, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Like you don't have to convince me one way or the other. Like I'm totally down with this. I think it'll be great. I'm not even worried about it. It's going to be good. And it's been even better than I thought it was going to be. And it's good to see people go out there. And again, the haters are going to say what they want. And it's an easy fallback joke. And people can go out there and be like, oh, Bears quarterback. I'm like, you know what? But it's always so different. And I try not to take it personal because what you might have seen on NFL Fantasy Live over the last couple of days is me going out there and defending Kyle Pitts and being like, and everybody goes, Kyle, we've been down this road before. I'm like, actually, you've never been down this road before because Kyle Pitts has never played with Kirk Cousins. He's never had Brian Robinson. Is it Brian Robinson who's the offensive coordinator? One of the Robinsons. It's like, listen, it's either Chris Robinson or his brother. I don't know. The guy from the Black Crows is the coordinator. But like, it's different. Like it's way different. And what you said makes the most sense in the fact that the biggest thing that I can think about with Bears quarterbacks is that for far too often, they've always had an Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, geez Louise, it was Mike Glennon who was standing over these guys. And I think it's just going to be completely different. So what are your expectations? Let's close with this. This season, week 1, don't be afraid to be hurt again. What do you expect the Bears to do this year? What do you think their final record is?
Well, it's funny you say that. We are doing on our Bear Down Chicago podcast next week. We are doing our season predictions.
Save it then. Save it as the tease.
I will. Give it away. But I am expecting double-digit wins.
Yes.
I'm expecting Caleb Williams to kind of be around that like 3,600 range. I'm not sure if he hits 4,000 yards because I don't know if he's going to be asked to do something like that. I also don't know how many games he's going to play. It's hard to play 15, 16 games in the NFL for a quarterback now. We haven't seen the Bears do that since 2009 with Jay Cutler. So, but I do think that having a rookie season where he's able to throw for around 3,600 yards, maybe like 24. I'm thinking of like, okay, I'm going to say this. I don't want people to think I'm like comparing the two situations, but I think if you look at somebody like Mitchell Trubisky's 2018 statistics, as where he had around like 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, something like that, and I think he had 12 picks. That would be stellar, I think, for a rookie quarterback. And he's obviously capable. I think he's capable of doing more, but I would be thrilled with that on top of a top 10 defense, could be top 5 if they can get consistent pressure to the quarterback with the defensive line. And then you're talking about starting the season hopefully on a high note and riding that defense to get some of those wins while Caleb continues to find his footing and become, even better as the season goes on. And then hopefully you find the ability to beat those division teams late in the year. I'm so scared. I cannot pick the Bears to beat the Packers until they actually do it.
That's the one. Like that. Braggs and I have been talking about that. It's the toughest game to pick because the Bears should go into that game against the Packers with the most momentum, and it's going to be the most build-up. And people are going to be now. I'll be on NFL.com, and I will for certainly pick the Bears publicly to win that. But it scares me when I'm doing a season long prediction. I'm like, that's probably that's going to be a game where we get trapped, and we're going to get a little too out in front of our skis and lose that. Then we play the Vikings the next week, and that's going to be tough. But then we get Detroit on Thanksgiving, and you're like, okay, we can rebound there because Detroit plays horribly. They've lost their last 6 Thanksgiving games, which is always funny to me. People are like, how do you think they're going to sweep the Lions? I'm like, they were beating the Lions for 116 minutes last year. Settle down. Like, I know the Lions think they're going and winning the Super Bowl. It's not happening. Well, it could happen. Who knows? But no. So it's very plausible. So I'm with you. It's just tough. And, Jordan Love was out there running his mouth, doing his thing at his camp, and he's raising money. It's hard to talk poorly about this because he is. I think his thing is like if for every win he gets, he's donating a pair of cleats to some high school in Wisconsin. So I don't want to. He's a good person, but then he's talking his ass about the Bears, and you're like, nah, let's beat him. Like we really can't say anything until we beat him.
Yeah, I don't hate Jordan Love yet like I do Aaron Rodgers. And so yeah, just beat him. Just go out there, just beat him. That's it.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. As long as Jordan Love wasn't bemoaning the fact that RFK Jr. got out of the race, I think we're fine. But in any event, I'll let that. Sorry, folks. I let that one slip. Here's the thing, though. Make sure you are following Brendan on the Twitter and all the other social media platforms at Brendan Sugrue, BrendanSugrue. I think I got that right. But I want to thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here. And bear down, brother.
Sounds good. Thank you, Adam. Hope we can do it again. And let's have a great start to the football season.
All right. Well, we'll have you back on real soon. Thank you so much for being here. And there he goes, the great Brendan Sugrue. Oh, love talking to him. Always a pleasure to be there. And Sammy, hit me with a little bit in the chat. Are we still waiting for Clay Harbor? It's okay. Like, listen, things happen. We're ready to go. Like we're just sitting here making things work. But in any event, I want to remind people too, if you're having trouble sleeping, and I don't think you should, I think you should be resting easy with these Chicago Bears. But if you do, Manta Sleep. Oh, it's the only mask designed and optimized for the deepest possible sleep in any environment. 100% blackout for deeper sleep. Infinitely adjustable for personalized fit. Absolute comfort. Visit mantasleep.com and use the code SICKBEARS for 10% off. I will tell you, though, over the weekend at Circa, so I stayed there one night. I couldn't use the mask because I was afraid of oversleeping and missing my flight the next morning. And so for that reason, I couldn't bring it with me. And so I just had to let it go. By the way, what about Homage? I gotta tell you, if you're watching NFL Fantasy Live this week, I'm going to be on, I got this awesome shirt from Homage. I don't have it on my person. Look for it this week because it's completely awesome. And realize too, Homage specializes in ultra comfy, high quality looks, repping sports, pop culture, and more legendary moments. Learn more about Homage with the link in the description. Just got a couple of pieces from them that I'm going to be wearing this week. Can't wait. One of them is it's the shirt. It's a hoodie that's so comfortable. You don't have to wear a shirt under it. Wear the hoodie on its own, like I do with this one. You can wear that. I wear that out there for coaching my soccer team. And then I also go out there and I got a great Homage shirt. I'll wear it this week. So you guys can all check that out. It looks like Clay Harbor is not going to be able to join us here today, which is fine. These things happen, and that's just part of the business. I do want to take a moment though and talk about something that's been happening on Bears Twitter over the last couple of weeks. First of all, it's Bragg's emotional and physical journey as he's going through knee surgery. I feel like we need to throw him a lifeline. I'm like, do we need to help you? Do we need to? No, he's doing great. But one of the things that I saw online is that, Micah Parsons, the Cowboys brought in CeeDee Lamb. And so, that's amazing. CeeDee Lamb signed. They still have to sign Dak Prescott. They still have to sign Micah Parsons. And there's a feeling that the Cowboys cannot sign all three, which to me, I feel like is absolutely false. If there is anybody who knows how to manipulate the salary cap, it's Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones Jr., and that crew down in Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys do a great job working their cap, being smart with their money, doing all that. I know that we love to like take shots at Jerry Jones, and he sometimes makes himself a pretty available target. Guy's pretty shrewd. Like he's a smart businessman. Listen, we're still trying to figure out our stadium situation here in Chicago. Are we going to be downtown or are we going to be out in Arlington Heights? Jerry Jones was able to get that through. I remember the last beam that was put up at the AT&T Stadium. Jerry Jones signed it. Like, this cost me my last nickel, and now he's doing very well. So I think that the Dallas Cowboys, if they want to, they could easily go out there and sign all three of these guys. But it gets people thinking, because it was about this time back in 2018. I remember it distinctly. It was a Saturday morning, and I'm sitting there getting ready for a fantasy draft. I had the number 1 overall pick in this fantasy draft, and one of my friends who's in this league, who's a Raiders fan, he sends me a message, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "Oh," he sends this cryptic message, and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh," and he's, still being super cryptic. "I can't believe you did this." But I'm like, "What the hell just happened?" And he goes, "You guys just traded for Khalil Mack." And I'm like, "Shut up. Like, this isn't the time for this. I don't have to, I'm preparing." And I was like it was like that. It's the fantasy morning where you do all a bunch of stuff. And so I'm like, "I don't have time for this. Like, stop it." And I'm arguing with him. And then I'm trying to, like, I've got like 4 different browsers open with 4 different drafts. And I'm trying to go through and find out where this information was, and then saw it. I forget who was the one who broke it, either Ian or Adam Schefter. And I'm like, "Oh my God, we've got Khalil Mack." And I'm going through, looking through all this stuff. And then I realized I missed the first pick in this draft. And it was the year that Le'Veon Bell was holding out from the Steelers. And I was on NFL Fantasy Live that whole offseason, be like, "Do not draft Le'Veon Bell. You want no part of this." Anytime a running back holds out for this long and this looks like it's going to get dirty and the Steelers don't play, don't do anything with him. And I remember, and I went back to work that Monday, and I'm like, why the hell is Le'Veon Bell the default number 1 in this scoring system? And I worked with this guy, this short guy who was on our show, and I'm like, why would you do, like, how do you have no sense of these things? And so we got Khalil Mack, but I ended up with Le'Veon Bell and did not win that league because of that, because you don't overcome things like that. But people are talking about that again, because, the Cowboys, who just brought in this morning, who signed Dalvin Cook to be their guy to compete, like the Cowboys are like, "You know what? We don't have enough old running backs." I know Rico Dowdle's there, but it's like, "You know what? I know we have Ezekiel Elliott, but what if we really try to relive 2019 and bring in Dalvin Cook?" And you're like, "Great job." As I'm sitting here lauding the Cowboys, maybe they have the right idea. Like, just bring in cheap veterans. Like, maybe Jerry Jones knows what he's doing. But it gets people thinking, like, what if the Bears, because I even thought this yesterday. It's like, there is a team out there with a need at running back, and the Bears might have a surplus with Khalil Herbert. Perhaps it would make a lot of sense to send Khalil Herbert to the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm thinking mid-round pick, like something later, day 3 pick or anything, like that's a little draft capital that we could do, build some things with. And we've seen Ryan Poles be very effective with picks like that. And then other people take it like one step further. And they're like, what if we trade Khalil Herbert, a number 1, for Micah Parsons? And you're like, okay, it's probably going to take a little bit more than that. And again, people go back to the Khalil Mack package. But like Ryan Pace is I almost said dummy, but I'm trying to get my kids not to say that word, so I won't say that. But he's stupid. No, that's the other word I'm trying not to get him to say. No, he's not. He's a fine person. He's made some bad choices personnel wise, but he's a fine person. He's not stupid. I'm not sure if a deal for Micah Parsons would have to look like what the Bears gave up for Khalil Mack, but it would have to be similar. And it really does lead itself into a philosophy of like what the Bears would do over the next couple of weeks. Now, we saw them make a couple of minor deals with some players that, Matt Eberflus has some familiarity with, somebody who could come in and play a role. And, not every deal has to be Montez Sweat. It doesn't have to be Khalil Mack to be effective. I think the Bears have done a really nice job of going out there and acquiring some talent who are going to come in and be a part of a rotation that helps make this team successful. I think that anytime you see some of these successful teams, and the Chiefs did this with Chris Ford and players like that, and we've seen the Lions do a nice job with this. You get those couple of big pop plays, a couple of those big trades and a couple of those big picks, and you're like, okay, like this makes sense, Montez Sweat, but not everything has to be that dramatic. And what we're looking for right now with the Chicago Bears is depth. Brendan and I were talking about it with the secondary. We talked about the secondary at great length before we even got to Terrell Smith. And we're talking about the depth at safety and things like that. And we barely even mentioned, if we did at all, Jonathan Owens. And there's something to be said about that. And it's the waves of that you have to fight through when you're going through an NFL season, is that, look, at some point, you really have to go out there and plug some holes because people are going to get injured. People are going to fall off, or things happen. The way the NFL goes, like you're never going through a season with 100% health. You want to minimize the risk as much as possible, try to, avoid huge injuries, long extended times, but still the way that you combat that is not by sending away all your draft capital, putting all your eggs in one basket. It kind of goes back to the wide receiver situation that we were talking about, is that it would have been a thing a couple of years ago under a different organization where they would have drafted Keenan Allen and been like, we're good. We need nothing else. We're super stoked. But the Bears went out there and said, no, we really need to invest. We really need to make sure that we have another wide receiver. We need to have a big three. I think a lot of successful teams have the big three. And we've seen some other teams. And I know the Chiefs have kind of gotten away with it but they have the big one with Travis Kelce. But still, they get their other guys to contribute. And I think that's where the Bears are trying to get to. And I think the Bears look at the situation, and it's something that I told Tyler Scott the night that Rome Odunze was drafted. It's like, look, you're going to still be a factor on this team. They're still going to look for you. Keenan Allen has battled injuries during his career. Like, you're going to get your opportunities. It's what you do with them when you get it. And for so many years, we would have gone into the season with Caleb Williams, like, okay, we got DJ Moore, and our next two receivers are Equinemius St. Brown and Byron Pringle. We've moved past those days. And as much fun as it would be to have Micah Parsons, and it would make a lot of sense. Like, he obviously would make this team a whole lot better. You got to start. And I know the Rams have had a lot of, they won a Super Bowl, so they've had success being like, bleep them picks. We're going to try to win right now. I still feel like we're one more draft cycle away. Like, let's see this play out. Let's see what we can accomplish with this team. Next year, we have a number one pick. I mean, you still want a number one pick next year. I anticipate that pick being in the 20s, but still, you want a number one pick. And then who knows, maybe you can acquire more picks that way too, by trading down or doing anything like that. I still think that you want to, I just don't think it's necessary right now. I think the Bears roster construction is really good. I love the depth. And if the Cowboys were willing to take a really discounted price, like I was sitting there on Poshmark the other day, somebody offered me these cool, shoes for $8. You're like, okay, well, this is a deal that I can't quite refuse because, you can never have too many waterproof golf shoes. But at the same time, you got to go through and just realize that the Bears are in a pretty good space. And if you take anything away from today's show, and I want to thank everybody here who's been joining with us. Sorry that we didn't get into any questions. We're going to try to come back later this week. We're discussing it. We're going to have our full season schedule up. But listen, I think we can feel comfortable with the Bears schedule. This is a roster that's ready to win. And this is a roster that should be mentioned amongst those. I turned to my NFL predictions, and I have the Bears winning the NFC North. And I know I do this every year, but I really believe it this year, and I think that it's going to be very good. So feel good about where the roster is. We don't have to do anything crazy. We got a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff coming up next week as well. Later this week and into next week, we're going to see. We're going to have a couple of changes, a couple of programming notes next week, but be sure to stick around for that. And we'll cover that as we get ready for week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. I can't wait to talk about it. So until that time, for Brendan and the boys in the back there in Canada, bear down. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcast. Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois.